All hands to battle stations. Captain Rice's voice cut through the stunned silence on the bridge. Tactical. Give me a full analysis of that vessel. Comms, broadcast on all frequencies, all languages. Tell them to power down immediately, or we will respond with force. The bridge crew moved with practiced precision, despite their shock. Lieutenant Santos at Tactical spoke first, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Captain, the alien vessel is approximately 3 times our mass. Energy readings suggest directed energy weapons far beyond our capabilities, but they're currently in standby mode. Their shield configuration is unlike anything in our database. Added Ensign Park from the science station, fingers flying across holographic controls. The materials in their hull. Some elements aren't even on our periodic table. Ray stared at the sleek, impossibly perfect alien vessel on the main view screen. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent quality that seemed to bend light around it, making it difficult to focus on directly. What had appeared as ceremonial lights now pulsed in a pattern that the Thunderchild's combat systems recognize as targeting protocols. Time to make a decision, she murmured, more to herself than her crew. Security Chief Vasquez stepped closer, keeping her voice low. Captain, we should retreat. We're outgunned, and Earth needs to know what happened here. And tell them what, exactly. Rice countered, her eyes never leaving the screen. That we ran after they murdered our people. That the first aliens humanity meets are hostile. We'd trigger a panic and a military buildup that would define human development for generations. On screen, the alien vessel began to move, gracefully reorienting toward the Thunderchild. They're powering up what appears to be a tractor beam, Santos reported, alarm evident in his voice. 10 seconds to activation. Ray straightened her uniform and made her decision. Shields at maximum. Load all missile tubes but do not target. Power up the railguns but keep them cold. Her executive officer, freshly promoted after Commander Kwan's death, looked at her in confusion. Captain, they killed our people through a misunderstanding, Rise explained, her voice hard as steel. I won't compound that error by starting an interstellar war if I can avoid it, but neither will I allow this ship to be captured. She turned to address the bridge crew. We are about to make history, one way or another. Humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization will be defined by what we do in the next few minutes. She activated the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the captain. As you know, we have encountered an alien vessel that destroyed our diplomatic shuttle. I believe this was a tragic misunderstanding, but we are now at a crossroads. This ship, your ship, represents humanity in this moment. We will attempt peaceful contact once more, but we will not surrender and we will not retreat. If we must fight, we fight not just for ourselves, but for Earth. Rise out. The alien vessel's tractor beam activated, a shimmer of energy reaching out toward the Thunderchild. Evasive pattern Delta 7, Rise ordered calmly. Break their lock. Then bring us alongside them, just outside their weapon range. I want them to see us clearly. As Lieutenant Ortiz executed the maneuver, a complex spiral that no automated system could easily predict, Rise initiated a ship-to-ship transmission, broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Captain Helena Reyes of the United Earth ship Thunderchild to unknown vessel. The craft you destroyed was a peaceful diplomatic mission. This action could be interpreted as an act of war, but we choose to believe it was a misunderstanding. We request immediate communication and cessation of all targeting activities. Be advised, we will defend ourselves if threatened further. The alien ship adjusted with impossible speed, its tractor beam narrowly missing the Thunderchild. For a moment, both vessels hung in space, weapons primed, separated by mere kilometers and an unbridgeable gulf of understanding. Then, unexpectedly, the alien vessel's lights changed pattern. A new configuration flashed across its hull, slower, more deliberate. Captain, Ensign Park called out, excitement in her voice. I think they're trying to communicate. The boarding party moved through the alien vessel like ghosts, their magnetic boots clacking against the metallic floors. Unlike human ships with their practical, utilitarian designs, the Confederation vessel's interior resembled an art installation. Sweeping curves, seamless transitions between materials, and holographic displays that seemed to float in midair. "It's like they never expected to be boarded," whispered Sergeant Wu, the team's security lead. "No internal bulkheads, no defensive choke points." Fray signaled for silence as they approached what sensors identified as the command center. The EMP had left emergency lights pulsing at irregular intervals, casting eerie shadows through the corridors. Ahead, they could hear the Confederation crew communicating in a language that sounded like crystalline chimes punctuated by deep resonant tones. "Remember," Fray addressed her team through their tactical network, "we're here to secure the vessel, not to harm its crew. Weapons tight." The doors to the bridge slid open, revealing a spherical chamber unlike anything in human ship design. The Confederation crew, their bodies tall and slender with luminescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions, floated helplessly in the zero-gravity environment. Without their automation systems, they couldn't even control their own movement. Supreme Adjudicator Zixel hovered near what appeared to be the central command interface. Unlike his crew, who displayed colors suggesting panic and fear, his skin maintained a steady blue-green hue. His 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern across his elongated face, regarded the human boarding party with what Fray interpreted as curiosity rather than fear. "Your barrier technology is impressive," Zixel spoke in perfect English, surprising the humans. "You've been monitoring our communications." "And you've been monitoring ours," Fray replied evenly, using her suit thrusters to navigate toward him. "That's how you know our language." A younger Confederation officer drifted too close to Sergeant Wu, who instinctively raised his weapon. The alien's skin flashed a panicked yellow. "Easy," Fray commanded. "They're helpless." Zixel's upper eyes narrowed. "Not helpless, Captain. Merely inconvenienced. Our auxiliary systems will restore gravity and automation within 6 hours. Your victory is temporary." "6 hours is plenty of time," Fray replied, activating her wrist computer. "Chief Kowalski, how's that data extraction coming?" "Accessing their central database now, Captain," came the reply from the engineering team elsewhere on the vessel. "Their encryption is complex, but follows logical patterns we can." "Wait, I'm in." Downloading navigational data, weapon specifications, and communication protocols. Zixel's skin shifted to a deep purple. "You cannot possibly understand our technology. Our civilization was reaching for the stars when your species was still discovering fire." Fray smiled thinly. "That may be true, Adjudicator, but there's something your people seem to have forgotten during your long peace." She gestured to her team, efficiently securing the bridge, adapting to zero gravity with practiced ease. "Necessity breeds innovation. Struggle builds strength." She pushed off gently, floating face to face with the alien dignitary. "When was the last time your crew trained for system failures? When did your engineers last perform manual repairs? How many of your people even know how to navigate without computer assistance?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Zixel's features. "This is not the first contact protocol we anticipated." "I imagine not," Fray replied. "Your people saw us as primitives to be guided, perhaps even pitied. But humanity has something your Confederation seems to have lost during its long peace: adaptability born from adversity." Through her comm, she heard Lieutenant Ortiz's excited voice. "Captain, you need to see this. We've accessed their star charts. The Confederation, it's massive. Thousands of worlds across multiple spiral arms." Fray maintained her composure despite the staggering implications. Earth was facing not just one advanced alien civilization, but an alliance of 17 species controlling a significant portion of the galaxy. "Adjudicator," she said, her voice steady, "I think it's time we discuss terms. Not as conqueror and conquered, but as equals. Your ship remains under my control, but I have no desire to harm your crew." What I want is information, and a guarantee that no more human vessels will be fired upon. Zixel studied her for a long moment, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. You are not what we expected, human. We rarely are, Rise replied. That's our greatest strength. Dr. Eliza Chen's presentation had reached its climax. The holographic display above the conference table showed a side-by-side comparison of Confederation and human tactical response times. The contrast was stark, even to the military hardliners who had been calling for immediate surrender. The average Confederation tactical officer takes 8.3 seconds to process and respond to an unexpected threat, Chen explained, highlighting the relevant data. The average human officer responds in 1.7 seconds. It's not that they're mentally slower. Their cognitive processes are actually faster than ours. It's that they've forgotten how to make decisions without consensus. President Alvarez of the Pan-American Alliance leaned forward. And you believe this advantage outweighs their technological superiority? In certain contexts, yes, Chen replied. Captain Rice's after-action report confirms it. Their ships are marvels of engineering, but they're designed for a society that hasn't faced real conflict in millennia. Their tactical doctrine assumes perfect information and time to deliberate. The room fell silent as Admiral Cheng, who had initially advocated surrender, slowly nodded. During the Indonesian crisis, we lost 3 carrier groups to inferior forces because our commanders were waiting for satellite confirmation before engaging. Technology means nothing without the will and training to use it effectively. Dr. Chen flicked her wrist, changing the display to show the projected course of the captured Confederation vessel, now under Rice's control, as it traveled toward Earth under escort by the Thunderchild. Captain Rice has bought us time and gathered critical intelligence, but we need to act quickly. The Thunderchild will reach Earth in 11 days. By then, the Confederation will have noticed their missing vessel. So what exactly are you proposing? Asked General Okonkwo. Chen took a deep breath. A diplomatic mission that defies their expectations. 7 of our most advanced warships, accompanying a delegation of our best diplomats and scientists. We show them that humans come in peace, but we're prepared for war. That's an extraordinary risk, Alvarez countered. We would be committing most of our space-based military assets to one mission. The risk of doing nothing is greater, Chen argued. The Confederation's scan data from our encounter with their ship is already spreading through their networks. They're seeing a species with nuclear weapons, orbital defenses, and interstellar capabilities, all developed through centuries of internal conflict. Their historical data shows that species with our profile typically expand aggressively. She paused, letting the implication sink in. From their perspective, we're not just unknown. We're dangerous. If we don't engage diplomatically on our terms, they may decide to eliminate the threat we represent. On the other side of the room, a Ukrainian representative, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. Dr. Chen's analysis reminds me of something my grandmother experienced during the Crimean annexation. When faced with a superior force, she said the worst strategy was to appear both threatening and uncertain. It invites preemptive action. The Security Council chamber grew quiet as the historical parallel registered. Earth's political leaders, despite their differences, recognized the truth in the observation. President Alvarez broke the silence. Who would lead this delegation? We need someone who understands the Confederation but won't be intimidated by them. All eyes turned to Dr. Chen, who shook her head. Not me. I'm a theorist, not a diplomat. But I know exactly who should lead this mission. She projected a new image, a service record with a familiar face. The person who's already proven they can stand toe-to-toe with the Confederation and win their respect. Captain Reyes. Admiral Cheng appeared skeptical. She's a military officer, not a diplomat. Precisely, Chen replied with a hint of a smile. The Confederation has plenty of diplomats. What they respect, what caught their attention, is someone who can make impossible decisions under pressure, someone who demonstrates what humanity truly is. The vote that followed wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. Operation First Light would proceed. Humanity's first official diplomatic mission to the stars, backed by the implicit threat of its most advanced warships. As the council adjourned, Dr. Chen gathered her notes, wondering if she'd just helped save humanity or doomed it. In 11 days, they would begin to find out. Administrator Fovek's translucent body pulsed with conflicting colors as she floated through the monitoring chamber of Outpost Serenity. The station's long-range sensors displayed real-time footage of the human diplomatic fleet, maintaining its precise formation despite the gravitational fluctuations near the system's outer asteroid belt. "Report," she demanded of her chief science officer. "Their formation efficiency exceeds Confederation military standards by 13%, he replied, his own chromatophores showing alarmed purple hues. "And they've done it while traversing a Class 3 gravitational anomaly, without automated assistance." This last detail clearly disturbed him most. The concept of piloting starships manually through complex spatial terrain was as foreign to Confederation officers as hunting with teeth would be to modern humans. Fovek turned to her chief of protocol, who was frantically reviewing historical first contact procedures. "Find me a precedent." "Anything." "There is none, Administrator," the protocol officer admitted. "In all 3,000 years of Confederation history, no species has ever initiated diplomatic relations by first defeating one of our vessels." On the command deck of the UVS Thunderchild, Captain Reyes stood with Commander Ibrahim as they prepared for the first official meeting with Administrator Fovek. Ibrahim, a former UN negotiator from Nigeria with expertise in cross-cultural communication, adjusted his ceremonial uniform. "Remember," he advised Reyes, "their social structures value harmony and consensus above all. Direct confrontation is considered extremely primitive." Reyes nodded, though privately she wondered how a species could advance without confronting difficult truths. "And their perception of time. Drastically different from ours," Ibrahim explained. "The administrator is considered young at 120 years old. They plan in centuries, not fiscal quarters." "Which we'll use to our advantage," Reyes replied quietly. "They may have time. We don't." The human delegation transferred to Outpost Serenity amid elaborate security measures that both sides recognized as largely symbolic. If either wished to attack, no amount of personal screening would prevent it. The real protection lay in mutual interest, and the 7 human warships maintaining their position just outside weapons range. The negotiating chamber itself revealed much about Confederation priorities. Unlike human diplomatic spaces, designed to project power or create neutral ground, this room emphasized interconnection. The circular table wasn't divided into clear sections but flowed like water, with areas subtly blending into one another. The lighting adjusted automatically to accommodate the visual requirements of different species. Ibrahim began the proceedings with a carefully prepared statement, acknowledging the unfortunate misunderstanding that had led to the destruction of the human shuttle. The translator rendered his words into the melodic tones of High Confederation standard. Administrator Fovek's response was polite but probing. "We regret the incident as well. However, we remain concerned about humanity's unusual development path. Most species achieve social harmony before technological advancement." Ibrahim smiled diplomatically. "Different environments produce different adaptations, Administrator. Earth's history of competition has driven innovation at an accelerated pace." "Competition," Fovek repeated, her body briefly flashing a skeptical orange, a polite term for warfare. Before Ibrahim could respond diplomatically, Reyes leaned forward. "Competition takes many forms, Administrator. Not all are violent, but all require adaptation, creativity, and growth." The meeting continued for hours, covering everything from trade potential to cultural exchange. Yet beneath the diplomatic language, both sides were taking measure of each other, the Confederation assessing whether humans could fit into their carefully balanced system, and the humans determining whether that system would allow them the freedom to develop on their own terms. As they recessed for the day, Warship Grell's fleet appeared at the edge of the system. 21 massive warships, ostensibly on a routine patrol, but clearly a show of force. The Confederation officers observing the sensors expected the human vessels to scatter defensively or adopt a passive posture. Instead, the 7 Earth ships smoothly reconfigured into what tactical analysts would later identify as hammer formation, a perfect response to the specific capabilities of Grell's fleet. It was as if they had been studying Confederation naval tactics for decades rather than days. In her private chamber, Administrator Fovek watched the sensor feeds with a body now pulsing deep indigo, the color of profound uncertainty. The humans were proving to be unlike any species the Confederation had ever encountered. The Vasic environmental suit hummed softly as Ambassador Kiros led Captain Reyes through a secluded hydroponics section of Outpost Serenity. The area, designed to grow medicinal plants from 17 different worlds, provided privacy it couldn't be found in the monitored common areas. "You understand the risk I'm taking by meeting you like this," Kiros said, her translator rendering her methane-based speech into English. The suit's external panels displayed shifting patterns that Reyes had learned expressed emotional states, currently showing what humans might recognize as anxious determination. "I appreciate it," Reyes replied, examining an iridescent plant that seemed to respond to their presence by folding its leaves. "But why the secrecy?" Kirvos's suit emitted a sound like distant wind. "Because what I'm about to tell you violates several Confederation protocol agreements." She activated a device on her suit that generated a localized interference field. The official history says that the Vasic joined the Confederation willingly after the Tiklaw helped us overcome a planetary crisis. "I'm guessing that's not the whole story," Reyes said quietly. "The Tiklaw created the crisis," Kiros replied, her suit patterns darkening. "A tailored pathogen that affected our atmosphere's methane balance. They offered the cure in exchange for our compliance and resource rights to our outer planets." She paused. "We're not the only ones. The Juriani's solar stability issues were engineered by the Arbiters. The Quantum Collective's cognitive plague appeared suspiciously soon after they developed independent faster-than-light technology." Reyes absorbed this information, piecing it together with patterns she'd observed in the negotiation sessions. The founding species maintained control through engineered dependency. Precisely. The Confederation presents itself as a coalition of equals, but the power balance has been locked in place for millennia. Kiros moved closer, her suit's front panel almost touching Reyes' shoulder. "We monitor your negotiations. When your commander Ibrahim rejected the offer of technological assistance packages yesterday, several junior species took notice. We've learned to be cautious about gifts," Reyes said with a grim smile. "Wise caution. The assistance comes with coded restrictions, subtle technological dependencies that aren't apparent until you're fully integrated into Confederation systems." The ambassador's suit displayed what Reyes interpreted as hesitant hope. "Your approach, demanding independent development with limited shared technologies. It's revolutionary in Confederation terms." Across the station, Lieutenant Ortiz was holding court with a group of young Confederation officers in what passed for a recreation area. Despite cultural differences, certain aspects of military life remained universal, including junior officers' curiosity about their counterparts. "You're saying you control the ship manually, always?" asked a Petran navigator, his crystalline appendages glinting under the ambient lighting. "Not always," Ortiz replied, demonstrating a piloting maneuver using a holographic model. "For standard operations, automation handles the basics, but in combat or emergency situations, we take direct control." "But the computational requirements," the Petran began, "aren't as important as instinct and experience," Ortiz finished. "Predictive algorithms can be anticipated. A human pilot, much harder to read." A junior Tiklaw officer, her telepathic dampeners visibly active to accommodate non-telepathic species, leaned forward. "Our historical archives suggest manual control was abandoned precisely because of human, or equivalent, error." Ortiz grinned, Mistakes are how we learn. My first flight instructor had me practice failing on purpose, so I'd know how to recover when it happened for real. The concept clearly disturbed the Confederation officers, whose entire training emphasized error prevention rather than error management. Yet several took notes on their personal devices, particularly the representatives from the junior species. In her secured quarters, Dr. Chen analyzed the socio-political data flowing from these interactions. Her algorithm detected a pattern. Confederation species fell into clear tiers of influence, with technological dependence correlating directly to political subordination. They've created the perfect system of control, she murmured to her AI assistant. Offer solutions to desperate species, end dependencies in those solutions, then leverage those dependencies to maintain hierarchy indefinitely. Like a digital ecosystem with deliberate backdoors, the AI replied. Chen nodded. And humanity has just introduced a virus to that ecosystem. The idea that species can remain independent while still cooperating. She marked a series of interactions where junior Confederation representatives had sought out human counterparts for private conversations. The question is, she added, how will the system's immune response react? Supreme Adjudicator Zixel, now serving as a reluctant liaison between humans and the Confederation Council, found Captain Reyes in the observation lounge. The vast window displayed the swarm's approach, a writhing mass of interconnected biological matter that distorted space around it. The evacuation protocols have been initiated, he stated without preamble. 17 worlds lie in its projected path. The displacement of populations has already begun. Reyes didn't turn from the window. How many lives will be lost in the evacuation alone? Zixel hesitated. Approximately 4 million, primarily among species with complex environmental requirements or those with limited mobility. An acceptable loss given the alternative. Acceptable. Reyes finally faced him, her expression hard. 4 million lives are never acceptable losses, adjudicator. You misunderstand, Zixel replied, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. The swarm consumes all biological matter. Without evacuation, the death toll would be in the billions. We've learned to accept what cannot be changed. Reyes activated the holographic display at the center of the lounge. The table projected their compiled analysis, a 3-dimensional model of the swarm with highlighted regions indicating cellular density and activity patterns. Look here, she insisted, highlighting a section near the entity's core. These areas show reduced cellular regeneration after exposure to certain radiation frequencies. And here, she rotated the model. Tentacle growth is stunted when approaching planets with high concentrations of platinum group metals. Yes, the evacuation protocols account for these observations, Zixel acknowledged. We direct the swarm toward uninhabited systems with planetary compositions it tends to avoid. You're missing the point, Reyes argued, frustration evident in her voice. These aren't just navigation preferences, they're biological vulnerabilities. The swarm isn't avoiding these elements, it's being harmed by them. In the science lab, Dr. Chen and her team worked alongside Confederation researchers who had cautiously embraced her hypothesis. The human approach, testing rather than accepting, had attracted younger Confederation scientists frustrated by centuries of stagnant thinking. The cellular structure responds negatively to resonance at this frequency, a Giuliani biochemist observed, her tentacles manipulating a sample of preserved swarm material. But our weapons cannot generate sufficient energy at the required wavelength. What if we don't need to affect the entire organism simultaneously? Chen proposed. Biological systems this complex must have central nodes, coordination centers that regulate the whole. The lab door slid open as Reyes entered with Zixel. We've identified potential target areas, she announced, transferring data to the main display. If Chen's theory is correct, disrupting these regions could trigger a cascading failure. The Council has rejected your proposal, Zixel stated flatly. The risk is deemed unacceptable. By whom? Chen challenged. The same leadership that hasn't developed new approach strategies in 1,000 years. Zixel's skin darkened with emotion. You don't understand the complexities. No, you don't understand urgency, Rise interrupted. Every hour we debate, more people are displaced, more lives disrupted. You have the luxury of time. We don't. She turned to Chen. How soon can Ni missiles be deployed? We've modified the delivery system to work with Confederation transportation technology, Chen replied. But we'll need to get much closer to the swarm than the Confederation has ever attempted. The targeted regions are protected by the entity's outer layers, which means suicide runs, Rise concluded grimly. Precisely why the Council rejected the plan, Zixel interjected. No species would volunteer for certain death. The room fell silent as Rise looked around at her team. Human scientists and engineers who had been working alongside their Confederation counterparts for weeks. She didn't need to ask. She could see the determination in their eyes. Then it's fortunate we brought our own volunteers, she said quietly. Later that night, in her private quarters, Rise drafted the message that would be sent to Earth regardless of the mission's outcome. It contained detailed information about the Confederation, recommendations for future diplomatic approaches, and personal messages for the families of her crew. As she finished, her console chimed with an incoming transmission, priority encoded from outposts across Confederation space. Reports of junior species vessels breaking standard protocols, redirecting toward the human fleet's position without Council authorization. The message from Ambassador Kirvos was simple. We stand with humanity. In the observation lounge, Supreme Adjudicator Zixel watched the swarm grow larger on the viewport. For the first time in his 3-century existence, he found himself hoping that everything his civilization believed about the universe was wrong. Shields at 32%. Chief Engineer Kowalski shouted over the klaxons as the Thunderchild shuddered under another assault from the swarm's tendrils. We can't take another hit like that. The battle had been raging for 3 hours, far longer than any previous engagement with the swarm in Confederation history. The joint fleet, human warships alongside vessels from the Vasic, Petrons, and Quantum collectives, had penetrated deeper into the entity than anyone had thought possible. But the cost had been devastating. On the tactical display, Rise watched as the UES Challenger disappeared from the grid, its signal replaced by an expanding debris field. Captain Rodriguez and her crew of 247 were gone in an instant. The Gagarin was reporting critical hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. The Zhenghe's engines had failed, leaving it drifting helplessly as tendrils enveloped its aft section. Lieutenant Park, Rise called to her science officer. Status of the neural clusters. Scans confirm increased activity in the regions we targeted, Park replied, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The resonance disruption is having an effect, but the organism is adapting faster than our models predicted. Through the viewport, the swarm's interior was unlike anything human eyes had witnessed before, a cathedral of undulating tissue illuminated by bioluminescent pulses that seemed to follow complex patterns, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Captain. Communications Officer Diaz interrupted. Message from the Vasic vessel Eternal Seeker. Their containment fields are failing. Their atmosphere is venting into space. A moment later, Ambassador Kirvos's voice came through, distorted by interference. Captain Rise, we can no longer maintain structural integrity, but our ship's drive core remains functional. Rise understood immediately. Ambassador, we volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. Kirvos cut her off. My species has lived under domination for generations. Let our final act be one of defiance and hope. Before Rise could respond, the Eternal Seeker changed course, driving deeper into the swarm's mass, targeting what sensors had identified as a primary neural cluster. The vessel's signal disappeared from tactical seconds later, replaced by an energy surge that momentarily disrupted the swarm's cohesion in that sector. They've created a delivery pathway, Dr. Chen announced, her voice tight with grief and determination. The Nemesis deployment has a clear channel now, but it won't last long. Rise made the hardest decision of her career. All remaining vessels. Execute Protocol Thermopylae. Volunteer crews to deployment vessels, all others to escape pods. She paused, meeting the eyes of her bridge crew. I'll pilot the Thunderchild myself. Her executive officer stepped forward. With respect, Captain, that's not happening. The crew of this ship volunteered together. We finished together. Around the bridge, officers nodded in silent agreement. No one moved toward the escape pods. Across the communication channels, similar scenes played out on the remaining vessels. Despite the option to evacuate, most crews chose to remain with their ships. The Confederation officers observing from a safe distance couldn't comprehend the collective decision. Why aren't they leaving? A Ticklaw commander asked Supreme Adjudicator Zixel, who watched the unfolding events with an expression of dawning understanding. Because, he replied softly, they believe what they're fighting for is worth more than their individual survival. The remaining ships executed a synchronized maneuver that confused the swarm's defensive responses, splitting into smaller groups, creating openings for each other as they penetrated toward different neural clusters. The Petron crystalline vessel Starlight Reflection was the next to fall, its structure shattering under the swarm's assault, but successfully delivering its payload to another neural node. Aboard the Thunderchild, Rise activated the final sequence. The Nemesis weapon, Earth's darkest creation, now its brightest hope, powered up as the ship's remaining energy was diverted to its emission arrays. All stations, prepare for final approach, she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Lieutenant Ortiz, plot a course directly to the central node. Ortiz's hands moved across the manual controls with practiced precision. Course plotted, Captain. It's been an honor. As the Thunderchild accelerated toward the heart of the swarm, Rise opened a channel to all remaining Allied vessels. Remember what we fight for today. Not just for Earth, not just for our allies, but for a future where no species stands alone against extinction. The ship plunged forward, trailing fire and debris, carrying humanity's deadliest weapon toward the core of the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. The Confederation Memorial Hall had never hosted a ceremony quite like this one. Species from across the galaxy filled the vast chamber, their environmental needs accommodated by fields that shimmered almost invisibly around different sections. At the center, the holographic replica of the UES Thunderchild rotated slowly, every battle scar and modification rendered in perfect detail. Admiral Rice, her new rank still strange to her, adjusted the sleeve of her dress uniform over her Petron crystal prosthetic arm. The limb she'd lost during the swarm's final attack had been replaced with technology that merged human neural interfaces with alien crystalline structures, a fitting symbol of the new cooperation reshaping the galaxy. Nervous? Ibrahim asked as they prepared to enter the hall. Now serving as Earth's first official ambassador to the Confederation, he had traded his military uniform for diplomatic attire that incorporated subtle design elements from multiple species' formal wear. Not nervous, Rise replied. Just processing. 6 months ago, we were preparing for humanity's extinction. Now we're being honored by a galactic civilization. The memorial ceremony began with a moment of silence observed in the manner of each species present, some standing motionless, others performing ritual movements, the quantum collectives pulsing in synchronized patterns. High Counselor Narvex, who had once called for humanity's containment, now addressed the gathering. We come together to honor not just victory, but transformation. The defeat of the swarm marks the beginning of a new era for the Confederation, one where strength comes not from uniformity, but from diversity of approach. She gestured toward the monuments representing each vessel lost in the battle. These ships and their crews made the ultimate sacrifice, not just for their own worlds, but for all worlds. They demonstrated that true civilization is measured not by its technological achievements, but by its courage to face extinction rather than surrender to it. In the diplomatic section, Dr. Chen sat beside Supreme Adjudicator Zixel, who had become humanity's most unexpected ally in the Reformed Council. Your sister would be proud, he said quietly, referring to Admiral Chen, who had personally delivered Earth's neonesis technology to the fleet. She always believed first contact would either destroy us or transform us, Chen replied. I don't think even she imagined it would do both. After the ceremony, Rice found herself in one of the station's observation domes with Ambassador Kirvos, one of the few Vasic to survive the battle. The ambassador's new environmental suit displayed celebratory patterns, but her voice carried a note of solemnity. My world has begun developing our own defensive systems, she said. After centuries of dependency, we're reclaiming our technological sovereignty. Several other junior species are doing the same. The Council approved this, Rides asked, surprised by the speed of change. The Council is evolving, Kirvos replied. Your approach to the crisis forced them to confront the stagnation in their thinking. When several junior species threatened to leave the Alliance if reforms weren't implemented, the founding members finally recognized that true strength comes from balanced power, not controlled dependency. Beyond the observation window, a new class of ship conducted maneuvers, its design clearly incorporating both human and Confederation elements. The Thunderchild I was the first vessel created by the Joint Development Directive, a program bringing together engineers from across species to share innovation rather than restrict it. Lieutenant Ortiz, now Captain Ortiz, led the test flight, her reputation for manual piloting having earned her legendary status among younger Confederation officers eager to learn the human way. As the new ship executed a complex spiral maneuver, Rice felt a presence beside her. Warship, who had once called for humanity's containment, now commanded the Confederation's reformed defense forces. Impressive, he acknowledged grudgingly. Though I still maintain that some of your tactics unnecessarily risk crew safety. Rice smiled. We're working on that, just as you're working on allowing more tactical flexibility. Their conversation was interrupted by a young human ensign who approached with an urgent message. Earth's deep space telescopes had detected unusual energy signatures at the edge of explored space, possibly a new sentient species or an unknown phenomenon. Your orders, Admiral, the ensign asked. Rice looked around at the gathered representatives of a dozen worlds, former enemies, now allies, and made the decision that would define the next chapter of this unexpected journey. Prepare a joint contact mission, she said. Scientific, diplomatic, and yes, military contingents. Whatever's out there, we'll face it the way we've learned works best. Together, Ambassador Kirvos finished. But ready for anything, added Warship.